Lisa Chen was having one of those days where everything seemed to go wrong. She had just finished her morning shift at the local diner, where she worked as a waitress, and was rushing to her second job at the department store when her car started making strange noises. The old blue Honda that had faithfully carried her around town for the past 4 years was now coughing and wheezing like an old man climbing stairs. Steam began rising from under the hood, and Lisa felt her heart sink. She pulled over to the side of the road and watched helplessly as white vapor billowed out from the front of her car. This was the last thing she needed right now. Between working 2 jobs to pay for her apartment and sending money home to help her younger brother with his college expenses, a major car repair would completely destroy her already tight budget. Lisa grabbed her phone and called her friend Jenny, who recommended Dave's Auto Repair just a few blocks away. Jenny had gotten her car fixed there before and said the prices were reasonable. With no other choice, Lisa managed to drive her limping Honda the short distance to the garage, stopping twice to let the engine cool down. Dave's Auto Repair was a typical small-town garage. The building was old but well-maintained, with large bay doors that were wide open to let in the afternoon breeze. Classic rock music played from a radio somewhere inside, and the familiar smell of motor oil and gasoline filled the air. Several cars were parked outside waiting for service, and Lisa could see mechanics working underneath lifted vehicles. As Lisa pulled into the parking area, her car gave one final shudder and died completely. More steam poured out from under the hood, creating a small cloud around her vehicle. She sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath and trying not to panic. Money was already tight, and she couldn't afford to miss work because her car was broken. A man emerged from underneath a red pickup truck that was raised on a hydraulic lift. He was probably in his early 50s, with graying hair and arms covered in tattoos that had faded with age. His blue work shirt had Dave embroidered on the pocket, and he walked with the confident swagger of someone who had been fixing cars for decades. He wiped his hands on a dirty rag as he approached Lisa's car. "Having some trouble there?" Dave asked, though the answer was obvious from all the steam still rising from her hood. Lisa got out of her car and explained what had happened. "It started overheating about 10 minutes ago. I made it here, but I think it might be something with the cooling system. I was hoping maybe I could take a look at it myself, to save some money on labor costs." Dave looked her up and down with a skeptical expression. Lisa was a petite woman in her late 20s, wearing her diner uniform of a simple blouse and black pants. Her long black hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had the tired look of someone who worked too many hours just to make ends meet. Dave let out a loud laugh that echoed through the garage. "Listen, honey," he said with a patronizing smile. "This isn't exactly like changing a light bulb or unclogging a sink. Car repair is real work that requires real knowledge and expensive tools. Why don't you just let the professionals handle this?" 2 younger mechanics who had been working nearby stopped what they were doing and walked over. Mike was probably in his 30s with short brown hair and oil stains on his coveralls. Chris looked like he was barely out of high school, with spiky blonde hair and an eager expression that suggested he was still new to the job. "What's going on, boss?" Mike asked, grinning as he saw Lisa standing next to her steaming car. "This young lady here thinks she can fix her own car," Dave explained, and both younger mechanics started chuckling. "I keep telling people that YouTube videos don't make you a mechanic." Lisa felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but she tried to keep her voice calm and polite. "I'm not saying I'm a professional mechanic or anything like that. I just have a little experience with cars, and I thought maybe if it was something simple I could handle it myself. I really can't afford a big repair bill right now." Dave shook his head with mock sympathy. "Look, sweetheart, I get it. Nobody wants to spend money on car repairs. But the thing is, when people try to fix things themselves without knowing what they're doing, they usually make the problem worse. Then I have to charge them even more to fix their mistakes on top of the original problem." Chris nodded eagerly, clearly wanting to impress his boss. "Yeah, we see it all the time. People watch a 5-minute video online and think they're experts." Lisa's embarrassment was quickly turning into frustration. She had grown up around cars and knew more than these men were giving her credit for. But she also needed their help. "Could you at least give me an estimate for the repair?" she asked. Dave walked around her car, barely glancing at the engine before pronouncing his diagnosis. "Well, from the looks of all that steam, you've probably got a blown head gasket. That's a major repair. We're talking about pulling the engine, replacing gaskets, maybe machining the head if it's warped. You're looking at least $800, maybe more depending on what else we find once we get in there. Lisa's face went pale. $800 might as well have been $8,000 for someone in her financial situation. She worked 40-hour weeks at both of her jobs and still barely managed to cover her basic expenses each month. There was no way she could come up with that kind of money. $800? She repeated quietly. Like I said, maybe more. Dave continued, clearly enjoying her distress. These old Hondas can be tricky. Once you start taking things apart, you never know what other problems you might find. Could be 1,000 or 1,200 by the time we're done. Mike and Chris exchanged knowing looks. They had seen this routine many times before. Dave had a habit of quoting high estimates to customers he didn't think could afford quality work, hoping they would just go away and not waste his time. Is there any chance I could just take a quick look under the hood? Lisa asked desperately. Maybe it's something smaller than a head gasket. I promise I won't touch anything important. I just want to see what might be causing the overheating. Dave sighed dramatically as if she was asking him for an enormous favor. Fine. If it'll make you feel better, go ahead and look. But don't touch anything, and don't blame me when you realize you're in over your head. He tossed her a pair of work gloves with exaggerated chivalry. Here, these might keep you from getting too dirty. Mike and Chris positioned themselves nearby, clearly expecting to be entertained by watching Lisa struggle with something they assumed she knew nothing about. Dave leaned against the side of her car with his arms crossed, wearing the smug expression of someone who was certain he was about to be proven right. Lisa took the gloves and put them on, trying to ignore the condescending stares from the three men. She knew they expected her to fumble around helplessly, maybe poke at a few random parts and then give up in defeat. What they didn't know was that she had been learning about cars since she was 12 years old, and she had a pretty good idea of what was wrong with her Honda. Lisa took a deep breath and popped the hood of her Honda. The engine was still hot, and steam continued to rise from various parts of the cooling system. She waited a moment for some of the steam to clear, then leaned in to get a better look at what she was dealing with. Dave, Mike, and Chris watched her with amused expressions, like they were about to witness some kind of comedy show. Dave checked his watch impatiently and muttered something to Mike about how this was going to be a waste of time. Careful there, don't burn yourself on anything hot, Chris called out in a mocking tone. Those engines get pretty toasty when they overheat. Lisa ignored the comment and focused on the engine bay. The first thing she did was check the coolant reservoir, which was nearly empty. That was a clear sign that coolant was leaking out somewhere. She then traced the upper radiator hose with her eyes, looking for obvious signs of damage. What exactly are you looking for? Dave asked with barely concealed impatience. Because like I told you, this is probably a head gasket issue. You're not going to be able to see that just by staring at the engine. I'm checking the cooling system components first, Lisa replied calmly. Sometimes overheating is caused by simpler problems than a blown head gasket. Mike snorted with laughter. Oh, really? Like what? Well, it could be a bad thermostat, a leak in one of the hoses, a failing water pump, or even just low coolant levels, Lisa explained, continuing her inspection. A head gasket failure usually has other symptoms too, like white smoke from the exhaust or coolant mixing with the oil. The three men exchanged glances. Her answer was more detailed than they had expected, but Dave wasn't about to let that faze him. Sure, Dave said dismissively. Anyone can memorize a few terms from the internet. But knowing what words mean and actually diagnosing a problem are two completely different things. Lisa found herself getting more frustrated with their attitude, but she was determined not to give up. She needed to find out what was wrong with her car, and she couldn't afford to pay $800 for a repair that might not even be necessary. Could I borrow a flashlight? She asked. I want to check the underside of the radiator hoses. Chris looked at Dave, who shrugged and grabbed a small flashlight from his toolbox. Here you go. Try not to drop it in the engine. Lisa took the flashlight and began examining the hoses more carefully. The rubber was old and had some surface cracking, which was normal for a car this age, but she was looking for active leaks or bulges that would indicate a failure was imminent. You know, Mike said to Chris, loud enough for Lisa to hear, I had a girlfriend once who thought she knew about cars. She tried to change her own oil and forgot to put the drain plug back in. Drove about 2 blocks before the engine seized up completely. Chris laughed. My sister did something like that too. She put windshield washer fluid in the radiator because she thought it was the same thing as coolant. Lisa gritted her teeth and continued working. She had heard these kinds of stories and jokes her entire life, always told by men who seemed to think that every woman who touched a car was destined to make some catastrophic mistake. After a few more minutes of inspection, Lisa stood up and brushed a strand of hair out of her face. "I think I found part of the problem," she said. Dave rolled his eyes. "Oh, this should be good. What's your expert diagnosis, doctor?" "The lower radiator hose has a small split in it, right where it connects to the radiator. It's not a huge leak, but it's definitely losing coolant. And I suspect the thermostat might be stuck closed, which would explain why the engine got so hot so quickly." The garage fell quiet for a moment. Mike and Chris looked uncertain while Dave's confident expression faltered slightly. "A split hose?" Dave said, moving closer to take a look. "Where exactly?" Lisa pointed to the area she had identified. "Right there where the hose clamps onto the radiator inlet. You can see where the coolant has been dripping down onto the ground." Dave crouched down and looked where she was pointing. Sure enough, there was a small but definite crack in the rubber hose, and a puddle of green coolant on the concrete floor beneath the car. "Well, I'll be," Mike said quietly. Dave stood up quickly, clearly annoyed that Lisa had found something he had missed during his cursory inspection. "Okay, so there's a small hose leak. That still doesn't explain all the overheating. Like I said, you've probably got bigger problems than just a hose." "That's why I want to check the thermostat," Lisa replied. "If the thermostat is stuck closed, the coolant can't circulate properly through the engine. Even a small leak becomes a big problem because the system can't maintain proper coolant levels or circulation." Chris looked confused. "How would you check a thermostat without taking the whole thing apart?" Lisa smiled for the first time since arriving at the garage. "There are a few ways. You can feel the upper and lower radiator hoses when the engine is running. If the thermostat is working properly, both hoses should get hot at roughly the same time. If the thermostat is stuck closed, the upper hose will get hot while the lower hose stays cool." Dave was getting increasingly irritated by Lisa's knowledgeable responses. He had built his reputation on being the local expert, and having a young woman show up and start pointing out problems he had missed was not good for his image. "Look," Dave said more aggressively, "even if you're right about the hose and the thermostat, those are still professional repairs that require proper tools and experience. You can't just duct tape a radiator hose and call it fixed." "I never said I was going to use duct tape," Lisa replied calmly. "I was hoping I could buy the replacement parts and install them here using your tools. I'd be happy to pay a small fee for tool usage." Mike and Chris looked at each other nervously. They were starting to realize that Lisa might actually know what she was talking about, which made their earlier jokes seem pretty foolish. Dave, however, was not ready to back down. "Absolutely not. I'm not letting some amateur work on cars in my shop. If something goes wrong, I'm the one who's liable. Besides, how do I know you won't damage my tools or hurt yourself?" "I understand your concern about liability," Lisa said, "but I'm willing to sign a waiver, and I promise I'll treat your tools with respect. I just really need to get my car running, and I can't afford an $800 repair bill." Dave crossed his arms and shook his head firmly. "No way. If you want the car fixed, you pay for professional service. That's how it works in the real world." Lisa felt her shoulders sag with disappointment. She had hoped that proving she knew something about cars would earn her a little respect, and maybe some flexibility on the repair options. Instead, Dave seemed even more determined to shut her down. "How much would you charge just for the parts?" she asked. "Maybe I could take the car somewhere else to have the work done." Dave quoted her prices for the radiator hose and thermostat that were nearly double what she knew she could find at an auto parts store. It was clear he was trying to make money on every aspect of the transaction. Lisa realized she was fighting a losing battle, but she wasn't ready to give up entirely. She had come this far, and she was determined to find a way to get her car running without breaking the bank. Lisa stood there for a moment, looking at her broken-down Honda and feeling the weight of her situation. She needed this car to get to work, and she couldn't afford Dave's outrageous prices, but she also couldn't just give up and walk away. An idea began forming in her mind. "What if I could prove to you that I know what I'm doing?" Lisa asked, looking directly at Dave. "What if I could fix this car right here, right now, using your tools and parts? If I mess something up, you can charge me your full rate plus damages. But if I fix it correctly, you only charge me cost for the parts." Dave laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "You're serious? You really think you can just waltz in here and start working on cars like you're some kind of trained mechanic?" "I'm serious," Lisa replied firmly. "Give me one chance." Let me show you what I can do." Mike and Chris looked at each other uncertainly. The younger mechanics had started to realize that Lisa might actually know more than they had initially thought, but they weren't sure how Dave would react to this bold challenge. "This is ridiculous," Dave said, still chuckling. "But you know what? Fine, I'll make you a deal. You can try to fix your car, but when you inevitably screw something up or realize you're in over your head, you pay my full rate without any complaints, and you sign a waiver saying you won't sue me if you hurt yourself." "Deal," Lisa said without hesitation. Dave shook his head in disbelief and went to get a liability waiver from his office. While he was gone, Mike approached Lisa with a somewhat apologetic expression. "Look, I don't want to discourage you or anything," Mike said quietly, "but Dave's been doing this for 25 years. He's seen a lot of people who thought they knew about cars but really didn't. Are you sure you want to do this?" Lisa appreciated that Mike was at least trying to be nice, even if he still doubted her abilities. "I'm sure," she said. "I know what I'm doing." Chris joined the conversation, looking nervous. "What if Dave gets really mad when you can't fix it? He doesn't like being wrong about stuff." "Then I guess I'll deal with that when it happens," Lisa replied. Dave returned with the waiver and watched as Lisa signed it without even reading the fine print. He was certain this was going to end with her admitting defeat and paying his full repair bill. "All right then," Dave said. "Let's see what you've got. But remember, you break it, you bought it." Lisa rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The first thing she did was properly assess the cooling system by checking the coolant reservoir cap and examining the radiator itself for any signs of internal damage or blockage. She moved with confidence and purpose, her hands working efficiently as she traced various hoses and connections. "The coolant level is critically low," she announced, "but the radiator itself looks fine. No signs of internal corrosion or blockage." Dave crossed his arms and watched skeptically as Lisa borrowed a socket wrench set and began working on the thermostat housing. She worked carefully but quickly, clearly familiar with the process. "You know," Dave said mockingly, "most people would start by draining the cooling system properly before removing the thermostat." "I already checked," Lisa replied without looking up from her work. "The system is nearly empty already because of the hose leak, so there's not much to drain. But I did put a catch pan underneath just in case." Mike blinked in surprise. He hadn't even noticed Lisa place the drain pan, but sure enough, there it was, positioned perfectly to catch any spilled coolant. As Lisa removed the thermostat, she held it up for everyone to see. "Look at this," she said, showing them the small metal component. "See how the spring mechanism is corroded and stuck? This thermostat hasn't been opening properly, which means coolant couldn't circulate through the engine, even when the system was full." Chris leaned in for a closer look. The thermostat was indeed corroded and clearly stuck in the closed position, exactly as Lisa had predicted. "That's actually exactly what you said it would be," Chris said, sounding amazed. Dave's confident expression was starting to crack, but he wasn't ready to admit he had been wrong. "Okay, so you got lucky with the thermostat. But installing a new one correctly is a lot trickier than just taking the old one out." Lisa ignored his comment and moved on to the radiator hose. She pointed out the split she had identified earlier, which was now clearly visible with the engine cooled down. The crack was small but deep, and it had obviously been leaking coolant for some time. "This hose has probably been leaking slowly for weeks," Lisa explained as she worked. The owner might not have noticed because it only leaked when the system was under pressure from being hot. Combined with the stuck thermostat, it created a perfect storm for overheating. As she removed the damaged hose, Lisa was careful to clean the connection points thoroughly before installing the replacement. She checked the hose clamps to make sure they weren't corroded and positioned everything properly before tightening the connections. Mike found himself genuinely impressed by Lisa's methodical approach. "Where did you learn to do all this?" he asked. "My family," Lisa replied simply, not elaborating further as she focused on her work. Dave was getting increasingly frustrated as he watched Lisa work with obvious skill and knowledge. Every step she took was correct. Every tool she used was the right one for the job, and her explanations of what she was doing were completely accurate. "Anyone can replace a hose and thermostat," Dave said defensively. "The real test is whether the car actually runs properly when you're done." Lisa installed the new thermostat with the same careful attention to detail she had shown with everything else. She made sure the gasket was properly seated and torqued the bolts to the correct specification, without having to look up the numbers. "Now we need to refill the cooling system and bleed out any air bubbles," Lisa said, reaching for the coolant container. "If there's air trapped in the system, it won't circulate properly and could cause overheating even with all the new parts." She added coolant slowly, allowing air to escape naturally, then started the engine and let it warm up while monitoring the temperature gauge carefully. As the engine reached operating temperature, she squeezed the upper radiator hose to help work out any remaining air bubbles. "The upper hose is getting warm," she announced, "which means the thermostat is opening correctly. Now let me check the lower hose." Lisa felt the lower radiator hose, which was also warming up nicely. The temperature gauge on the dashboard remained in the normal range, and no steam was rising from under the hood. "Both hoses are hot, the temperature gauge is normal, and there's no overheating," Lisa said with quiet satisfaction. "The repair is complete." Dave stared at the Honda in disbelief. The engine was running smoothly. The cooling system was working properly, and Lisa had fixed everything exactly as she had promised. Mike and Chris looked equally amazed. "I can't believe it," Chris whispered. "She actually did it." Lisa turned off the engine and began cleaning up the tools she had borrowed, organizing everything neatly and wiping down any surfaces she had gotten dirty. Her professionalism and attention to detail were obvious in everything she did. "So," Lisa said, turning to face Dave, "I believe our deal was parts at cost?" Dave stood there speechless, his entire worldview about women and car repair completely shattered. This young woman had just performed a perfect repair in his own garage using his tools, while he watched every step of the process. Dave stood there staring at Lisa's perfectly running Honda, his mouth slightly open in shock. The engine was purring quietly. The temperature gauge showed normal readings, and there wasn't a single drop of coolant leaking anywhere. In less than an hour, this young woman had diagnosed and fixed a problem that he had completely misread. Mike and Chris were equally stunned. They had watched Lisa work with the precision and confidence of someone who had been fixing cars for years, not someone who had learned a few things from internet videos. "That was incredible," Chris said, breaking the awkward silence. "I mean, you made that look so easy." Lisa smiled and wiped her hands on the shop rag. "It wasn't too complicated once I figured out what was actually wrong. The symptoms all pointed to cooling system problems, not a blown head gasket." Dave finally found his voice, though he sounded considerably less confident than he had an hour ago. "I have to admit, that was impressive. You clearly know what you're doing." He paused and looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Where exactly did you learn all of this? Did you go to automotive school or something?" "No, nothing like that," Lisa replied, gathering up the tools she had borrowed and putting them back in their proper places. "My mom taught me everything I know about cars. She always said it was important for everyone to understand how machines work, especially women, because too many people will try to take advantage of you if you don't know better." Mike nodded approvingly. "Smart woman. Not many parents teach their kids practical skills like that anymore." "Yeah, my mom's pretty amazing," Lisa said with obvious pride in her voice. "She's been working on cars her whole life. Started when she was just a teenager and never stopped learning." Dave was still trying to process what had just happened. His entire reputation was built on being the local expert, and this young woman had just shown him up in his own garage. But more than that, he was genuinely curious about how she had acquired such solid technical knowledge. "What kind of work does your mom do now?" Dave asked. "Is she a mechanic somewhere?" Lisa finished organizing the tools and turned to face the three men. "She's a master technician at Rodriguez Automotive Training Center, about 30 miles north of here. She runs their advanced certification program and trains mechanics from all over the region." Chris looked impressed. "Wow, that's a pretty big deal. I've heard of that place. They train people for ASE certification, right?" "Among other things," Lisa said. "Mom specializes in engine diagnostics and electrical systems. She's one of only a few master-level female technicians in the state." Dave felt a strange sensation in his stomach, like something important was trying to surface in his memory. "Rodriguez Automotive Training Center," he repeated slowly. "What's your mom's name?" "Rosa Martinez," Lisa replied. She kept her maiden name professionally because she built her reputation under that name. Most people in the industry just call her Martinez. The color drained from Dave's face so quickly that Mike thought he might be having a heart attack. Dave grabbed onto the fender of a nearby car to steady himself, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. "Rosa Martinez?" Dave whispered. Are you serious? Rosa Martinez is your mother? Lisa looked concerned by Dave's sudden change in demeanor. Yes, why? Do you know her? Dave sat down heavily on a nearby tool cart, running his hands through his hair. Know her? She was my instructor 15 years ago when I was getting my master technician certification. Rosa Martinez taught me almost everything I know about advanced diagnostics. The garage fell completely silent except for the gentle hum of Lisa's repaired Honda. Mike and Chris stared at Dave in amazement, while Lisa tried to process what she had just heard. You studied under my mom? Lisa asked, her voice filled with surprise. Dave nodded slowly, looking like he had seen a ghost. She was the best instructor the training center had ever had. Probably still is. I was just a regular mechanic back then. Good with basic repairs, but nothing fancy. Rosa Martinez taught me how to think like a real technician instead of just throwing parts at problems. Mike looked back and forth between Dave and Lisa. Wait a minute. Are you saying that Lisa's mom was your teacher? Not just my teacher, Dave said quietly. She was my mentor. I was struggling with the advanced coursework, especially the electrical diagnostics. I was about ready to give up and stick to oil changes and brake jobs. But Rosa took extra time with me, stayed after class to help me understand complex problems. Dave's voice grew softer as the memories came flooding back. She never talked down to anyone or made them feel stupid for not understanding something. She had this way of explaining things that made even the most complicated problems seem manageable. Lisa felt a warm glow of pride hearing someone talk about her mother with such respect and admiration. That sounds like her. She always says that good teaching is about meeting people where they are and helping them get to where they want to be. I remember this one time, Dave continued. I was working on a diagnostic problem that had me completely stumped. Some kind of intermittent electrical issue that I couldn't track down. Rosa sat with me for 3 hours after class, walking me through her systematic approach to electrical troubleshooting. By the end of the session, I had not only solved that problem, but learned a whole new way of thinking about complex repairs. Chris looked amazed. So Lisa's mom basically taught you how to be a master mechanic? Dave nodded, looking increasingly embarrassed as he remembered his earlier behavior toward Lisa. She taught me that being a good technician isn't about showing off or proving how smart you are. It's about listening to what the customer needs, diagnosing problems correctly, and fixing them right the first time. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone in the garage. Dave had spent the past hour condescending to and dismissing Lisa, only to discover that she was the daughter of the woman who had shaped his entire career. Rosa always talked about her family, Dave said, looking directly at Lisa. She was so proud of her kids and how hard they worked. She used to say that she hoped her children would grow up to be the kind of people who treated everyone with respect, regardless of their background or circumstances. Lisa felt her eyes getting watery, but she smiled. She still says things like that. Dave stood up slowly, looking like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Lisa, I owe you an enormous apology. The way I treated you today was completely unacceptable. I made assumptions about you based on nothing but prejudice and arrogance. It's okay, Lisa started to say, but Dave held up his hand. No, it's not okay. Your mother taught me to be better than that, and I failed to live up to what she tried to instill in me. I acted like exactly the kind of person she always said we should never become. Mike and Chris watched this exchange with growing understanding of just how significant this moment was. They had witnessed their boss being humbled in a way they had never seen before. Rosa Martinez, Dave repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. I can't believe I just spent an hour trying to convince Rosa Martinez's daughter that she didn't know anything about cars. She's probably taught you more about automotive repair than most people learn in trade school. Lisa nodded. She started teaching me when I was 12 years old. Said it was important for me to understand how things work so I'd never be helpless or taken advantage of. Dave looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Everything Rosa Martinez had taught him about respect, professionalism, and treating people fairly had just come crashing back to him, along with the realization that he had failed spectacularly to live up to those standards. Dave sat there for a long moment, staring at the ground and shaking his head slowly. The weight of his behavior was crushing him, and he knew that a simple apology wasn't going to be enough. He had disrespected not just Lisa, but everything that Rosa Martinez had taught him about being a decent human being. Lisa, Dave said finally, looking up at her with genuine remorse in his eyes. I need to make this right somehow. What I did today was inexcusable and I'm ashamed of myself. Lisa could see that Dave's regret was sincere. The arrogant, dismissive man from an hour ago had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely devastated by his own actions. I appreciate the apology, Lisa said quietly, and I can see that you really mean it. But that's not enough, Dave said, standing up with sudden determination. An apology doesn't undo the way I treated you. Your mother would be horrified if she knew how I acted today. He walked over to his cash register and started counting out bills. First of all, you're not paying anything for those parts. Not a single penny. Dave, that's not necessary, Lisa protested. We had a deal. The deal was that you'd prove you knew what you were doing, and you did that beyond any doubt, Dave replied, walking back over with the money. But more than that, I want to pay you for the labor. You did professional quality work, and you deserve professional compensation. He handed Lisa $200 in cash. That's what I would charge a customer for the diagnostic work and repair you just performed. You earned every cent of it. Mike and Chris watched this exchange with amazement. They had never seen Dave give money back to a customer, much less pay someone for work they had done on their own car. Lisa looked at the money in her hand, hardly believing what was happening. Dave, this is really generous, but I can't take payment for fixing my own car. Yes, you can and you will, Dave said firmly. You provided a service that was worth this money. The fact that it was your own car doesn't change the quality of the work you did. Chris stepped forward, looking somewhat embarrassed. Lisa, I want to apologize too. The things Mike and I said earlier were out of line. We made jokes about women and cars that weren't funny at all. Mike nodded in agreement. Yeah, we were acting like jerks. Watching you work today taught me that I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. You showed more skill in 1 hour than I've seen from some guys who've been doing this for years. Lisa smiled at both of them. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Dave walked over to his office and came back with a business card and a pen. He wrote something on the back of the card and handed it to Lisa. This is my personal cell phone number, he said. If you ever need any kind of automotive help day or night, you call me. I'll drop whatever I'm doing to help you, and I'll never charge you for anything ever again. Dave, you don't need to do that, Lisa said, but he held up his hand. Yes, I do. Your mother helped me become the mechanic I am today. And instead of honoring that by treating her daughter with respect, I did the exact opposite. This is the least I can do. Dave paused and looked around his garage as if seeing it with new eyes. You know what? I think it's time I made some bigger changes around here. He walked over to a whiteboard where he kept track of daily tasks and erased everything on it. In large letters, he wrote, "Treat every customer with respect regardless of who they are." That's going to stay up there permanently, Dave announced. And I want both of you, he said, pointing to Mike and Chris, to hold me accountable if you ever see me treating a customer the way I treated Lisa today. Mike and Chris nodded solemnly, clearly taking this commitment seriously. There's something else, Dave continued. Lisa, I know you're working 2 jobs to make ends meet. If you ever want to pick up some extra work, I'd be honored to have you help out here on weekends or evenings. You can name your own rate. Lisa's eyes widened in surprise. Are you offering me a part-time job? I'm offering you whatever kind of opportunity you want, Dave replied. Part-time work, full-time if you're interested, or just occasionally when you need extra money. Someone with your skills and knowledge would be an asset to any shop. That's incredibly generous, Lisa said, but I should probably mention that I'm not looking to make automotive repair my career. I'm actually saving up to go back to school to study engineering. Dave's face lit up with excitement. Engineering? That's fantastic. With your mechanical background and your obvious intelligence, you'll make an excellent engineer. He thought for a moment, then continued. You know what? I have connections at the technical college and the state university. I'd be happy to write you letters of recommendation or help you network with people in the engineering field. Chris looked at Mike and whispered, I've never seen Dave get this excited about helping anyone before. Your mother always said that the best part of teaching was watching her. Students go on to achieve great things, Dave said to Lisa. I'd be proud to help you in any way I can, just like she helped me. Lisa felt overwhelmed by this sudden turn of events. She had come to the garage expecting to be charged hundreds of dollars for car repairs, and instead she was leaving with money in her pocket and job opportunities. I don't know what to say, Lisa admitted. This has been such an unexpected day. Say you'll give me a chance to make up for how badly I started off, Dave replied. And maybe you could give your mom my regards next time you talk to her. Let her know that one of her old students is still trying to live up to what she taught him, even if he doesn't always succeed. Lisa smiled warmly. I'll definitely tell her about today. She'll be proud to hear that you remembered her lessons and were willing to make things right when you realized your mistake. Dave walked Lisa out to her car, which was running perfectly after her expert repair work. The other customers in the waiting area looked up curiously as Dave personally escorted her outside, something they had never seen him do before. Lisa, Dave said as she got into her Honda, I want you to know that meeting you today changed something in me. Your mother taught me about being a good mechanic, but you reminded me about being a good person. I won't forget that lesson. As Lisa drove away from Dave's auto repair, she couldn't help but smile at how the day had turned out. She had come expecting to be taken advantage of because she was a young woman with car troubles. Instead, she had proven herself, earned respect, and even made some new friends. Most importantly, she had honored her mother's teachings by staying calm under pressure, solving problems with knowledge and skill, and treating everyone with dignity even when they didn't immediately return the favor. Back in the garage, Dave turned to Mike and Chris with a determined expression. Gentlemen, he said, today we learned something important. We learned that our assumptions about people can blind us to their abilities and worth. From now on, this shop is going to be a place where everyone gets treated fairly, regardless of who they are or what they look like. He looked at the whiteboard message he had written and nodded with satisfaction. Rosa Martinez taught me how to be a good mechanic. Today, her daughter taught me how to be a better man.